Today we will continue with Domain 11, Frontier Explorers. Our story is titled Lewis and Clark, The Journey Begins. Today we will find out about the group of people gathered by Lewis and Clark known as the Corps of Discovery. Now these people were gathered to accompany and help them. The Corps of Discovery was a part of the U.S. Army whose members joined Lewis and Clark to explore the land added to the United States as a result of the Louisiana Purchase. These men needed to have specific skills, and you're going to listen to find out what those skills were that Lewis and Clark were looking for in order to be most helpful to them on this expedition. Before they began their exploration of the Louisiana Territory, Meriwether Lewis traveled to Indiana to join William Clark and gather their team of explorers. Lewis explained, "As I wrote in my letters, Will, because the United States government is paying for this exploration, we will travel as members of the U.S. Army. I ask that we be made co-captains so we would have equal command over our men." Soon they traveled to the city of St. Louis, where the wide Missouri River flows into the even mightier Mississippi River. St. Louis was a frontier town. Its streets and stores bustled with hunters and trappers who had chosen to live far beyond the more settled cities of the East. The two captains knew it would take courage, intelligence, and skill to reach the Pacific Ocean, so they looked for people who knew how to survive in forests and on rivers and mountains. These people would need to know how to hunt and fish for food and build shelters in which they could stay warm, dry, and safe. Some were Americans who had grown up in Virginia or Pennsylvania and who had later moved farther west to live in Kentucky. Others were Canadians from the country north of the United States who spoke French as well as English. The two captains finally put together a team of trusty men who were daring and brave enough for the expedition. Among the men who joined Lewis and Clark's group, one man stood out. He appeared before them one day dressed half in manufactured clothing like their own and half in animal skins favored by woodsmen. "I am George Drouillard," he told them. "I hear you're going all the way to the Pacific. Ask the others you have already hired about me. They'll let you know I speak French, English, and some Native American languages, so I can help you communicate with your men and with many Native people you meet. I also know the hand sign languages used by Native Americans who live out in the Great Western Plains. When different tribes meet, they use this sign language since their spoken languages are not all the same. I can ask them about the country ahead and help them understand you and that you've come in peace." Lewis and Clark had to gather supplies as well as people. They were going to need to take a lot of things with them on their trip. They purchased some long, narrow canoes called pirogues and one larger, wider boat called a keelboat. On the deck of the keelboat stood a little cabin that held supplies. Riders in the pirogues moved their narrow boats forward using canoe paddles, but the keelboat had a sail. Moving the keelboat was slower and more difficult than moving a pirogue. When a strong enough wind was behind them, it pushed the keelboat along, but if there was no wind, the men had to take turns pushing and pulling it with poles and ropes. Then on Monday, May 14, 1804, the explorers were ready. They called themselves the Corps of Discovery. Now they would leave St. Louis and travel west along the Missouri, as President Jefferson had requested. As one of them, Private John Whitehouse, wrote in his diary that day, "We hoisted our sail and set out in high spirits for the Western expedition." At last, they were on their way. And we will have to find out what they discover when we meet again